What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take a phone call from Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I got one of my random lists. I waited till near the end of the show. Hope it's okay timing.
Okay.
Just want to remind everybody about the radiation from self-driving cars is going to be astronomically more dangerous than cell phone radiation, and it's to take that into consideration with this leaked document about the actual dangers of the radiation that from the EPA, that the cell phones really are of concern, and that there is a correlation between the location of brain tumors in many patients and the way that they hold the cell phone. I'm always looking for reasons to be down on the self-driving cars, so this is one of them.
Well, I think that's a problem only if you have one of those cars that has plastic bodies. If you have an old-fashioned traditional, or you have a car that's got a steel body, you're obviously going to be shielded from the radiation because the emitters, receivers have to be on the outside of the car.
Well, you can get pretty good cell phone reception inside of a metal car.
Point taken. Point taken.
Okay, next one. The Prime Minister of Canada, just a fun fact here, the name Prime Minister, the definition of a minister is somebody who serves you, like who ministers to your needs. And over in England, the top minister, like the top servant, is the groom of the stool. That cleans the Queen's rear end. And so the Prime Minister in Canada can't...
we seem to be going off in a bizarre direction here, Mateus, and I think maybe...
forget about it.
Yeah, I think we need to get back to the news here. All right, so, Mateus, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And you got to stop drying your hair in the microwave oven. All right, turning to the economic news, Gregory Mannarino is out there saying that there are serious signals in the bond market. Everyone's talking about what's going to go first, the stock market, the bond market. Everyone's talking about how overvalued the stock market is. Gregory Mannarino is saying the bond market is starting to flash red. And the indicators just aren't there to say that we have a working economy, and they're talking now the greater recession. They might as well go ahead and say we're in a depression. We have been in an economic decline going back at least to 2008. And they like to keep talking about the soaring stock market, which we know is the result of manipulation. But if you were to take all those stock market numbers and revalue them in terms of gold, you would find that the stock market has actually been in decline. Now, apparently, Adidas, the shoe manufacturer, is closing down their factory in Asia and relocating to Germany. That's the good news. The bad news is the German factory is going to use robots to make the shoes. So it's not actually creating any jobs. Now, robots are cool and robots are fun, but again, there seems to be this institutional blindness where owners of corporations don't seem to understand. Your employees, collectively, are also collectively your customers. You cannot have a working economy where everybody's trying to sell things that are made by robots or foreign labor, and your customers don't have the jobs with which to earn the money to buy those products. And it's for that reason why in the stores that are now getting these self-service automated checkouts, I won't use them. We're hearing about fast food restaurants now starting to use robots. I won't go to them. We have got to get people back to work. We have over 90 million Americans who've been unable to find jobs for months, if not years. And that's 90 million Americans who are not able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries and then take that money and pump it back into the economy. It's a failed system. Now, apparently, and we've talked about this before, but apparently U.S. tourism is in trouble. And a big part of it has to do with vacationers coming from Mexico who are enraged by Trump's immigration ban, and so they're flying over the U.S. and going up into Canada. Now, our tourism industry has been in trouble for a long time, long before the immigration issue. Hawaii obviously is heavily dependent on tourism, and starting with the abuses of the TSA, our tourism has really suffered because of it. Our tourism authority likes to claim that our hotels have an 80% occupancy rate, which sounds really good. What they're not mentioning are all the resorts, B&Bs, hotels that have gone out of business. I mean, if you drive up the leeward side of Oahu, you will see these resorts, huge resorts, that have just been boarded up. The grounds are going back to the wild. They used to be booming businesses, not anymore. Now, I think the state is thinking that this new light rail system is going to draw some tourists away from Waikiki, which is not making Waikiki happy, and get them out at least as far as Ko'olina, which is this other resort area that's being developed by Disney, and sort of spread things out. They also want to take out some of the business congestion from Honolulu and lure it over to Kapolei. Some years ago, they built a new business technology incubator out in Kapolei, and the buildings, for the most part, still remain empty, because driving out on the H1 is a nightmare. The H1 has not been enlarged to deal with the increase in traffic. They've taken shortcuts, like the zipper lane. And if you don't know what that is, it means that the center lanes on the H1 freeway, there's a portable barrier that shifts back and forth to try and maximize the traffic coming in. In the morning, the eastbound traffic gets the extra lane. In the afternoon, the westbound traffic gets the extra lane. It's a big machine that just drives down the middle, shifting the barricade back and forth. Hence the name zipper lane. And unfortunately, that machine tends to break down a lot, which only makes things worse. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Pensions are in the news again. Apparently up in Chicago, Chicago collected $90 million for their pension plan, but they're having to pay retirees almost $1 billion. It's a huge, huge shortfall. All of these pensions are in trouble because back in 2008, when Wall Street was pulling off that mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's pet ratings agencies all rated these mortgage bundles AAA. Now, pension funds, because you're dealing with a clientele who is near the end of their life and they don't have the luxury of starting over again, pension funds are only allowed to invest in safe investments, AAA. And so pension funds bought into these. And the fraud collapsed. Pensions lost huge amounts of money, and that's why they're in trouble. Nobody wants to point the finger at Wall Street. Congress did get some of these ratings agencies executives in for a hearing, and the ratings agency executives said, well, it was just our opinion. You know, nobody should pay that much attention to it. It's just our opinion that these things were good investments. Everybody's passing the buck. Nobody went to jail for any of this. Apparently, a 56-year-old partner at Paulson and Company, who was linked to billions of dollars of losses in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, has jumped off a building in Midtown Manhattan. And a lot of people connected to the Madoff scam are suddenly dying. And it may be over a simple question. Where did some of this money go? They were never able to find out where all the money went to. And maybe somebody who knows where it is doesn't want there to be anybody else around who knows where it is. There seems to be a lot of wet work going on. Remember that period we went through with Deutsche Bank, where all of a sudden a bunch of their mid-level executives were all of a sudden walking off of parking structures and things. Now, Richmond Fed President Jeffrey Lacker has been forced to resign after admitting he leaked confidential Fed monetary policy information to Medley Global Advisors, a publisher of macroeconomic analysis for institutions such as hedge funds and asset managers. It's owned by the Financial Times. And there's no indication he's going to face criminal prosecution, but he was leaking out this information to give Medley Global Advisors a leg up, an advantage over people who are playing by the rules. It really is a corrupted system. Now, turning over to the European Union, there is more trouble in Brussels. Apparently, Serbia is now starting to have serious doubts about being part of the European Union. And we're seeing this start to manifest all over Europe. It's been building for a very, very long time. But now with the success of Brexit, Marine Le Pen talking about a Frexit, Italy and Greece talking about simply being forced out, and now with that heavy-handed stunt by Brussels, threatening Hungary and Poland, if they don't take any more refugees, they'll be forced out of the bloc. Everybody is starting to rethink this European Union experiment, and it's starting to fall apart. And all of George Soros' horses and all of George Soros' men are not going to be able to put this one back together again. Interesting little video coming out of Sweden. Remember, Sweden, world's first feminist government. They're hardcore liberals up there, open borders, welcoming everybody. And in fact, Sweden has gotten more refugees than pretty much any other nation in Europe so far. Huge influx. And it's causing all kinds of problems, rapes, robberies, and everything. And every time you talk about it, oh, you're just being racist, you're just doing this, you're just doing that. Well, there's an interesting little video where these 3 female police officers, remember, feminist government, these 3 female police officers saw this asylum seeker walking along the street with a metal rod smashing car windows. And they tried to take him into custody with another asylum seeker who was trying to help them, help the officers. And this guy still got away from them. They even pepper sprayed him. And he got away. Now, apparently there's been another ugly incident down in Virginia. This is reported at 12160. 3 Salvadorans basically murdered a teenager in Virginia and then mutilated the body. They've been charged with second-degree murder. So how's that open borders thing working out for you, huh? California's sanctuary state bill is now moving to the Assembly. And if it passes the Assembly and Jerry Brown signs it, which is highly likely, it's going to set up a confrontation between the state of California and the Trump administration. And the fact of the matter is that all of these sanctuary cities are in violation of the law. And it's one thing to defy a law if you think the law is bad. Okay? It's another thing when you're defying a law that's supposed to protect the people. And if we look at all of these situations around the world and here in the United States, of all the crime, the sudden introduction of contagious diseases, the MS-13 gang, and by the way, these 3 guys who were arrested for mutilating that kid in Virginia were members of MS-13. You understand these laws do serve a purpose to protect the American people. And all these politicians who are on board with the globalist agenda and the sanctuary cities are exposing their own people to increased danger to serve a political ideology. Now, down in Kansas City, voters have voted to lower the penalty for the possession of marijuana to a $25 fine and no jail. And we're continuing to see this demand for decriminalization all across the country. By the way, my server's under heavy attack right now. Somebody's not happy with something I said. Speaking of computers, interestingly enough, apparently some firms in Great Britain have come under large-scale hacking attacks, which appear to be espionage. And cybersecurity experts are saying, well, it's coming from China. China's breaking into steal trade secrets and customers' personal information. Really? How can you say that? We know the CIA has two completely separate programs, Umbrage, and I think the other one was Marble, where they copy and mimic hacking tools from other countries in order to carry out hacking attacks and frame a third party. And we know the U.S. government is openly hostile to China right now. It's another frame-up. It is impossible to say, in light of the revelations about the CIA, where something comes from, where a hack attack comes from. You can't. Now, down in Brazil, apparently hackers managed to take control of a Brazilian bank's entire DNS infrastructure. Now, this was discovered by Kaspersky Lab, and they were able to simply grab all of these banks' websites and redirect the traffic to phony servers that were set up to look like the real banks. People were logging in with their credentials, their passwords, and the hackers seized all of this information. Now, there was a very sad story a while back, and it had an unfortunate ending. There was a 15-year-old Canadian, Amanda Todd, and she got caught by an online sextortionist, Aidan Coban, who managed to hack into her webcam, got compromising pictures of her, and then demanded that she send more pictures of herself, states of undress, doing certain things, or he was going to post the pictures he already had to the rest of the world. And this poor young lady committed suicide. And apparently this Aidan Coban has now been approved for extradition from the Netherlands. And he may be coming back to Canada to stand trial for what he did. You know what is very frustrating to me? When webcams first came on out, they had these built-in shutters where you could close them. And for some reason, they don't have them anymore. Maybe it's the NSA saying, no, leave those off there. We got to watch people through those things. And again, every time the NSA opens up another portal to spy on you, they're opening it up for the cyber criminals. The NSA has not made America's IT infrastructure more secure. Quite the contrary. It is now incredibly weak and vulnerable. That's one of the reasons cybercrime is spiraling out of control. Now, apparently, Apple has rushed out an emergency patch to plug a severe security hole. And apparently, it lies in the vulnerability lies in Broadcom's Wi-Fi stack, which Apple uses in its handhelds and its iPads. And apparently, it's a nasty drive-by Wi-Fi security hole that they've just discovered. And by the way, if you have not changed your passwords on your iPhones and iPads, you only have 2 more days before the deadline for that ransomware demand that was being made against Apple by this hacking group in Great Britain. Now it's turning out that Tizen, which is the open source operating system that Samsung uses on a range of their Internet of Things devices, and is positioned as a sometimes competitor to Android, is just full of major security flaws. In fact, it's being described as amateurishly written. More about this when we come on back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phones. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Charlie, are you there? Going once? Going twice? Okay. All right. Back to the news. Now then, as you know, there's been a big stink over the fact that Congress has passed a law, and Trump has signed it, allowing Internet service providers to sell your browsing history to whoever they want. Marketing companies, advertising companies, blackmailers, who knows? A lot of people were very upset about this. And as it turns out, up in Canada, Canadian ISPs are not allowed to violate and sell your private information. But at this point in the United States, anything that makes money is seen as good. Anything that doesn't make money is seen as bad. This lust for stacks of paper with colored ink all over it has really destroyed what was best in the American character. I almost don't recognize this country anymore. It's certainly vastly different from what it was like when I was young. Now, Canada is not perfect. Apparently, Canada, in order to protect their use of the Stingray device, they just cut loose 35 mafia suspects. They had 35 mafia suspects. They collected evidence on them using the Stingray device, and rather than turn over information on the Stingray device in the court case, just let these mafia guys go. It was a massive criminal conspiracy. And in order to protect the Stingray, they just let them go. You can go out, be criminals again, conspire again. We don't want to do anything about that here. Now, we were talking the other day about privacy. We're always hearing that constant canard. If you've got nothing to hide, then why would you care about your privacy? If you've done nothing wrong, why are you obsessed with privacy? Well, why do you have curtains in your windows? Why do you close the bathroom door? Why do you have an opaque shower curtain? People have an instinctive need for privacy. They don't want everything that they're doing made public. And that doesn't mean that what they're doing is illegal. It's just private. So, to nobody's surprise, a recent Reuters Ipsos poll is showing a majority of Americans are unwilling to give up their privacy under this claim that somehow it will thwart terrorist attacks. And part of the reason is because while the media will make a huge presentation about the terror attacks, they are very rare. You're much more likely to be killed by your doctor than by a terrorist. And as we showed with our NSA challenge a few years ago, real terrorists, real criminals can easily create systems of encryption that cannot be broken by the government. And so this poll is showing 75% of adults say they will not let investigators tap into their Internet activity to help the U.S. combat domestic terrorism. Real terrorists already know the Internet is compromised. They're not going to use it. Or if they use it, it's going to be code phrases that will be meaningless to a man in the middle. Please stop for donuts on the way home. What does that mean? Are they really getting donuts, or is something else going on? Now then, let's see. Did Charlie come back? Charlie, are you there? Okay, all right, Charlie's gone. All right, phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443, and we're coming up on a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We got a bunch of phone calls to get to. We're going to start with Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You were talking about privacy and data collection in the United States. There's a story on the CBC today that the RCMP is doing just that to people up here in Canada. And this is coming from, the propaganda tax-funded CBC website. So the RCMP is admitting that they've been doing this illegally up until 2 months ago. So, this sort of thing is rampant. It's rampant. I mean, are they actually trying to bring down the governments of countries? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think what we're seeing is that all governments that are oppressing their people are now afraid that the people realize what's going on. And I think for the most part that this surveillance of everybody is more of a bluff than anything real. I'm sure that certain individuals are being targeted, like Donald Trump, but there simply isn't enough manpower or computer power to make heads or tails of this huge amount of data on the entire population. And so I think it's being put out there as a bluff to try and scare ordinary people into staying silent, not talking with each other about what's going on, not emailing articles back and forth, not visiting certain websites. And it's a repeat of the bluff that the Nazis did on the German people, where they deliberately crafted this image of the Gestapo, where they were omniscient and they saw everything, heard everything, they could virtually read your mind, and there was no getting away from them. So I really do think there just isn't enough computer power, manpower to make sense of all that data.
Yeah, because I've been trying to make sense of this. I mean, ever since Trump came in, I mean, there's been this whole propaganda, bashing of him, and even in the last month, they've been picking on the banks up here in Canada, which they should do anyway.
Yes, they should.
Like we get some people in here that belong to the big banks in Canada get hit for like over $25 a month just for service charges, just to allow them, to cash their checks because they have direct deposit or whatnot. And then they came out with this, and I'm thinking to myself, why would they admit this? Why? Why would they do this sort of thing other than to try and scare us into exactly what you said, obedience? But, I mean, in my mind, this works the exact opposite way. Like, I want to go up to Ottawa.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
A couple of million other people and throw these bums out of power.
It's not working very well here either, because it is making people very angry. Again, going back to this poor girl who was driven to suicide by this sexual blackmailer over the internet, the only reason this guy was able to break into her webcam in the first place are all these back doors the government has mandated be in our machines. And people should be rightly angry. I remember that big stink a few years ago where a school was supplying laptops to students that had webcams, and then it came on out. The laptops had special software that allowed the school administrators to spy on the kids in their own bedrooms, and you can imagine what they're watching. And it really is nonsense out there. We are being treated like we're property. We're being treated like we're livestock, where they feel they have a right to listen to us and watch us all the time, to decide for us what we're going to eat, what we're not going to eat, what medicines we may not take, what medicines we're forced to take. We're being treated as property. We're not being shown the respect due to a human being, and certainly a big.
We're the ones paying the bills.
Yeah. Well, that's all we are to them. We're walking wallets. We're walking wallets and baby-making machines.
You got it. Thank you, Mike.
Right.
I appreciate your time.
Thanks an awful lot. Charlie from Los Angeles, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, okay. Hey, I just got a little tidbit of trivia on Adidas. It was those evil Nazis that sponsored Jesse Owens by giving him a pair of Adidas. It was Adolf Dassler. He was a card-carrying Nazi back in 1936.
Okay.
And after the war, the Nazis went into France and they nationalized all the property. And then after the war, the property was returned, and now who owns Adidas is Julia Louise Dreyfus of Elaine Bennett's fame of Seinfeld. Her and her brother. They're the great-grandchildren of Louis B. Dreyfus of France. So it was the evil Nazis that sponsored Jesse Owens. They gave him a pair of Adidas.
Okay.
First spiked shoes for the long-distance race.
Well, my goodness, that certainly backfired on them.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying is, I don't think the Nazis were as bad as people try to make them out to be.
No, I don't think anybody in history is either as bad or as good as history tells us they are, because it's all being spun for political gain.
Yeah, well, the Americans didn't sponsor them. They didn't want anything to do with the blacks, but the Germans didn't have a problem with it.
Well, unfortunately, Adolf Hitler did, because it put a real dent in his Aryan superiority agenda. So anyway.
Yeah, but he had all those Muslim SS officers, remember? I don't think Hitler hated the blacks. I don't think he was a white supremacist. He killed more white people than anybody.
Hang on. I don't remember Hitler having Muslim SS officers. He had some Jews in there, but not. I don't remember there being Muslims.
There was plenty. Hey, Mike, you better check out your history. There was plenty of Muslim. All the Muslim countries were flying the swastika and wearing it on their arm. You better check your history.
All right. Well, I'll take a look at it, but I haven't seen that before. Anyway, we're going to let you go. Mateus in Canada is back. Mateus, please keep it short. What's on your mind?
Yeah, they call us human resources. That's what our official title is for them. And I think that they're planning on replacing us as much as possible with robots that don't have civil liberties and can't rebel and everything. You had that great caller about the vaccine reaction. He figured out that if it's injected into the bloodstream by accident, that could give the reaction, which could explain a lot.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make one last comment. You were talking about civil forfeiture the other day, and you said that it's analogous to the medieval times when the king's horsemen would come riding in and take the grain and the pigs. Well, back then they wouldn't dare take more than 10 or 20%, or it'd be like pitchforks. And nowadays we let them take 40, 50%, and we don't do anything. And
well, you
recommended that.
I don't think it's necessarily a function of numbers. I think it's a function, again, going back to the Declaration of Independence, people are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. And if you're making a good living and the government is taking half of it, and the half that you have left over is still enough to have a comfortable life, people aren't going to complain. But if you are just barely getting by month to month, anything the government takes is going to be a source of anger.
Yeah, definitely. And I watched your recommendation video, The Little Dot, on YouTube, and that is so good. I'm telling everybody to watch it. I put it in my email signature, which, by the way, if anybody wants to promote Michael Rivero, you can just make a little link in your email signature, and it goes out. Thanks, Michael. Have a great day. All
right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch over to George in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. We're not even human. We're not even human resources anymore. We're now human capital. Human capital management is the new term. So it just seems to get worse and worse. When any government becomes what is the term? When we have the right, inalienable right to alter or abolish bad government, we've got to really own that thing. We own that right. Got to walk around every day with knowing that you own that. That's your right, and that's when I think we begin to start taking action. When these government agencies do more harm than good, I think we've got to start demanding that they're eliminated. Either clean up their act or you're going to be eliminated. And we look at the NSA and what it's doing, specifically this center in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at the point where they're really doing more harm than good, aren't we?
We're definitely doing a lot of harm. I mean, the NSA isn't actually finding any real criminals or terrorists, neither is the CIA. They're spying on law-abiding Americans to make sure we're not thinking those double-plus ungood thoughts.
Yeah, so, I'm thinking that maybe we ought to demand that they rededicate that massive data collection center to something positive like basic research, maybe modeling on a molecular scale what's going on inside a human cell so we can learn more medically. Something like that. And we get more good out of the money we've already spent on projects like that. The only other point I wanted to make was you and I both go back to a time when computers had their operating systems in read-only memory.
Yes.
Like, I think the Amiga did. I know the Atari ST did initially, and the original Apple Mac had a lot of its operating system in read-only memory. With the ST, they were all based on the same microprocessor, the 68000 Motorola. The ST had an actual cartridge slot.
Yes.
We went back to our computers having a cartridge slot where you could just unplug the operating system and then plug it back in, and you can't write to it. And it's open source, and the manufacturers weren't afraid of it publishing what it was because they owned the chips. Wouldn't we be a lot better? Wouldn't we be able to do away with a lot of this potential damage from a lot of the you wouldn't eliminate all of the damage that hackers could do, but couldn't we eliminate a great deal of it?
Well, we could, but because of all the government-mandated backdoors, that's why they don't want you to look at the code. That's why you're literally banned by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act from even looking at the operating systems in your computers, your appliances, in your cars, and we keep finding out that they're just full of security holes. We're dealing with a policy of mandated surveillance on the American people, and the consequences of it are simply not a factor. Now, one of the cool things about the Raspberry Pi, of course, is that you can burn the operating system onto a micro SD, or you can, in fact, have it burned onto something a little bit more permanent as well. The Amiga actually had software operating system. There was a bootloader in the ROMs on that. Like the Commodore 64 and the Apple II, the operating system was in read-only memory, and it didn't mean that there wasn't malware out there. It was a lot easier to find and track down because the computers weren't designed to facilitate concealment of malware as they are today.
Right. It was a lot easier to take down. It was a lot harder for malware to destroy your operating system.
Well, it wasn't impossible, but again, if you had backups,
correct,
you know, that would do that. But there was malware. I remember I did a little work very briefly at a company that was designing games for the Amiga. I was actually an Amiga developer, and they had a little game that was a space shuttle simulator called Challenger. This was before Challenger blew up. But
I remember that program, yeah.
And unfortunately, the master disk that they made to send to the duplicator and packager had a virus on it. They didn't bother to reformat it before they copied the game onto it, and so it went to the duplicator with a virus on it. And the aftermath of that just drove the company right out of business.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike, and have a great day.
All right, same to you. We're going to switch over to Nick in Southern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Mateus called in twice. I figured I'd call in twice today, too. That last caller talking about, you know, putting our foot down on these government agencies that are hurting us and things like that. You know, Cliff High out there saying that Iceland, you know how they jailed their bankers, and one of the biggest reasons they were able to pull that off is because Icelandic people are basically just as Icelandic people. They don't have a bunch of different types of cultures. They have one culture, and were therefore able to move in one direction with the bankers.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the whole idea of all of the immigration to mix us up so we have no identity. It does take away our ability to move as one population.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one more thing. I sent you an email last night on the T-45. You talked about it, and the supposed strike in the Navy fighter pilot instructors. And apparently they have a source that says, you know, the official number is about 45% of the instructors went on strike, but supposedly the Navy saw this coming and put, you know, a lot of people off of work that day so they could deflate the numbers. The reality is it's about 75% of those instructors that went on strike, supposedly, according to a source.
Okay. But again, the point we're making here is the condition of our military is not very good. War is very rough on the hardware. It's not really built to last a very, very long time. They basically war game out. If they develop this kind of a platform, its reasonable life expectancy will be this before it's blown up or shot down, and that's what they build it to. Because anything past that adds weight that may actually shorten its lifespan. So we have been at war all over the world solidly since 2001. That's 16 years. And our stockpiles are drawn down. Our existing military hardware is worn out. And the new weapons that are being built continually turn out to be junk. F-35, F-22, the Gerald R. Ford, and on and on and on. We are not in a good position to be forcing a confrontation with Russia and China. And if they actually start a war with Russia and or China, I predict we're going to lose it, and badly.
Well, I think you're correct there from everything I've been hearing about, you know, I think this is like the military-industrial complex's version of planned obsolescence. why are they spending billions of dollars on hardware that doesn't work? I just don't understand it.
Well, it's a Cold War thinking. They spend all this money. Actually, they put most of it in their pocket, but they spend it on these weapons that don't really work, and they rig the tests to get it passed, because the theory is the Cold War will remain cold, and most of this stuff will never actually be used in combat. It'll wind up in museums and air shows and various things like that, and that's part of the whole scam. If you look at all of the stuff that was built during the Cold War of the 50s and 60s, the vast majority of it was never actually used in conflict, and a lot of it is now sitting out at that boneyard in Arizona just corroding away into the dirt. And that's the same thing going on now. I think a lot of these projects that we're seeing today, like the Gerald R. Ford, were being planned and put together before anybody was saying we might actually have to fight a war with this stuff. And now, of course, we have naval experts who are saying the Gerald R. Ford may never actually be usable or survivable in a real combat situation.
Well, the Pentagon might think that we're idiots, but they're not idiots. They have to know that if they're going to push a conflict of any kind, really, but a major conflict, we're going to be throwing our boys and girls at the enemy with terrible weapons. We're going to die.
They don't care. They don't care. They don't care. All right, got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment, and my apologies to the callers who were holding. We ran out of time. Call in tomorrow. Some of you had some very good talking points that we wanted to mention. Now, going on back to the last call that we did take, the planners of war, you need to understand their mindset. The planners of politicians who go to war. The deaths and disfigurements aren't a factor. Remember what Henry Kissinger said about military people are just dumb, stupid pawns to be spent for foreign policy. And if you look back at the history of the original M16 rifle, you will see just how this callousness will manifest. Now, the company Armalite developed the M16 as a replacement weapon. When the Pentagon announced they wanted to update the standard issue military rifle, and Armalite submitted their design, and there was a rival design that was going to be the M14, and a lot of the Pentagon brass were invested, had good relations with the company producing the M14, so they wanted that one to be selected. And their rationale for choosing the M14 over the M16 was that it used exactly the same ammunition as the M30 machine gun, therefore logistics would be simpler. And what they did is they conducted a field test in Vietnam where they issued some soldiers M16s, and here's where it got crooked. They put the wrong propellant into the cartridges for the M16s. And the propellant they used fouled the gun and jammed it. And they were literally finding dead soldiers with dismantled M16s around them. And so they said, well, obviously this weapon won't work in the real world. And Armalite found out what had gone on. They went to Congress. Congress actually had an investigation that revealed that there was an economic motive in these Pentagon procurement officers, and they were willing to let these kids in Vietnam get killed for the sake of their stock portfolio. And the Congress literally ordered the Pentagon to go with the obviously superior M16 design and to make sure the ammunition had the correct propellant in it. And obviously it was a good design. It's still around. It's evolved, but it's a very wonderful system overall. The civilian version is called the AR-15, and the AR, contrary to the gun grabber propaganda, does not stand for assault rifle. It's a designation from the original Armalite company that designed the weapon. That's where that comes from. So, I mean, that's the attitude. People in power literally are oblivious to the pain and suffering they cause to those beneath them. That's part of the sociopathic personality, and unfortunately, sociopaths do have a wonderful gift for finding their way to positions of power, wealth, and influence. And we would be nice if we had some kind of a laboratory test that would reveal a sociopathic personality before they got to that position, but we don't. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get on with the rest of my day here. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please make a point of taking what you find on the website, what you learn here on the show, share it with everybody. Keep pushing on the Susan Rice spying on Trump story. We can't let the corporate media distract from it or make it go away. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.